One dash 001 3, one dash 001 4, 9, 1 dash 001.00-5, 21 dash 0.00-007, 21 dash 001.00-013 and 5, Buttonwood Avenue, 21 dash 001.00-007, Buttonwood Avenue. So retail, commercial, residential district R2, and I will turn it over to Planner Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This ordinance is an ordinance to rezone the subject parcel. And it also involves a proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan. And as you'll see in the whereas clauses of the ordinance, subject parcels were inadvertently designated as commercial on the suggested land use map of the 2020 comprehensive plan. And before the hearing, I handed out some exhibits. And if you go to the comprehensive plan exhibit, there's this, and the inset shows the subject parcel, and it indicates what's being proposed in the ordinance, that those parcels are proposed to be redesignated on map 3 specific land use in the 2020 comprehensive plan from commercial to residential. And when the planning commission voted to forward the correct comprehensive plan to the city council, they had clearly intended that these parcels be designated as residential. And somehow it didn't get changed when it went to city council. The planning commission subsequently realized that as the city staff. And this rezoning, this ordinance, to rezone those parcels to amend the comprehensive plan is a city-sponsored ordinance. So this is being proposed by the city in a proactive manner. And as a result of having to wanting to change the comprehensive plan suggested land use designation, the city wishes also then to rezone the parcel from RC retail commercial to residential district R2. And that is the second map. So showing the parcel being rezoned from RC to R2. This ordinance had its first reading with the city council last Tuesday. Your role here is to make a recommendation to the city council on the rezoning for 230-61C. All proposals for amending, supplementing, changing, modifying, or repealing the zoning regulations, restrictions, or boundaries before being acted upon by the council, except those originating on motion of the planning commission, shall be referred by the council to the planning commission for consideration and recommendation. And there's more there if you want to get into it. But basically, your role is to make a recommendation to the council. Staff has been dealing with this for months. We've had one property owner purchase across one of these parcels. We wanted to build a residential structure on it. Kind of got us going on this proactive. Clearly, knowing what had happened with the last comprehensive plan, we knew that the planning commission had clearly intended that these parcels be designated as residential. We considered it Scrivener there, but we're still going through the
like to open the floor to public comment. What's your name, your address, and
Good evening, Phil Gross, from 1301 13th Street. First, let me, wish everybody a happy holiday and welcome Margaret. She's going to be a fine addition with her, experience. So thank you for, doing the, mission. I guess mine's more of a question because Beth is kind enough to give me time to explain it. The whole process, like you were saying about just the readjustment. Is it one builder that's looking to build on all the lots, or are these lots separate owners? Because my only concern is, it's one developer, looking to capitalize on Buttonwood. And that would be my only apprehension. So since there was no link on our meeting agenda site, I couldn't research, couldn't look up. So I'm just wondering, does anybody have any answers on that?
We don't have to get into questions and answers, but because this everyone's new, to the benefit of everybody. That question is really irrelevant. He looks before you. There's no development plan in front of us. This is a city sponsored action. I happen to state that one property or the first one of the parcels, but they are 6 separate lots of record, and six separate parcels. And all, as we understand it, all 6 property owners are aware of the fact that they have requested it from the city sometimes.
All right, thanks.
the motion to end the public session? We did.
Take a chill pill.
First of all, I'd like us all to, as I told you, proceed, please rise, and we're going to do the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Have a roll call of the commissioners. Margo, would you start, please?
Margot Rain,
Tim Gibbs.
William Rivera,
Matt Lovely.
Cynthia Batty.
Thank you. Before we get to the approval of minutes, we are going to have an agenda item change. We're going to move item 8, re-subdivision 37 West 3rd Street, up to item 6. Next item is the approval of last week's minutes, or I'm sorry, last month's minutes, including public meeting. Anyone have any motion to approve the minutes?
To approve. I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
You all can't vote.
That's just it.
They're there. Next item is public comments on current agenda items. Again, name and address. You'll have 3 minutes. And as a reminder, as we instituted several meetings ago. This is not meant to be a direct attack at commissioners. It is meant for the good of the commission in general to know. So if anyone would like to make a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Lovey. I'm gonna start, and you can certainly, shut me down on the first comments, but, the purpose of the planning commission, is to pass things that are favorable and to benefit the community. I, one, think that most of the committee, is good, but one particular commissioner has been on social media threatening
That's not
investors.
appropriate. That's not appropriate, Mr. Gross.
Okay.
Please, consider other
Right.
comments.
Moving to item 6, it's an easy no-brainer. I've seen the plans at the HAC meeting for that house, and I just think that should easily go through. And as far as the review of ordinance 536, I feel a project should go ahead. But I think at a later time, I think both parties, the city and the developer and their attorneys have agreed to, in principle, to at least accept more public input since the holidays are upon us, and I thought that it was inappropriate to have meetings with everybody's busy schedule be crammed up against the holidays. So most people couldn't make it and didn't make it to the last meeting. So I just want to be on record that some project of some scope should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more comments?
Hi. My name is Bob Novak. I am the owner of Winter Lot, 702 Drive, right behind the So I just basically wanted to get up to say I was shocked to see that when I heard about this and I was out of town. The sign was posted out front of my home that they were going to possibly change the zoning. When I purchased the house many years ago, I purchased it for the reason that it was a business home, and we were able to we redid the home in the corner as long as we kept it within the footprints of the existing home. So I did have a concern. I just wanted to be, I do have a business there. So
Regarding the item for which they had a public hearing.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but I know you had a public hearing. I apologize. I didn't know. I thought it started at 7. So I just wanted to get up and say I am for the community. I am for, if it's gonna up value of the homes and stuff like that in the area. I do understand that, but I just want to make sure that I'm not going to be put out of business in this process. So I just wanted to go on record that I do have a concern.
I don't understand what he's talking about. Can you be more specific? Sorry.
Well, they had a public hearing, I guess, at 6:30 for, I guess, the ordinance 537. Yes. I apologize for my naivety.
But where's your house located?
It's the first home directly behind the front homes.
So parcel 03.
Well, it's 702, yes, it'd be that parcel. Okay, we've always kept our site very neat and clean and, always been a part of the community. So I just wanted to be on record that, as it goes further, I plan on trying to be part of it, to make sure that things go on.
So you have an existing small business and you're concerned about the rezoning to
Well,
residential.
Yes, because I've made some
Mixed
substantial.
use though.
We can discuss it when we get.
Is that it?
I made substantial investments in it, and I'm concerned about losing it.
So get that.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Sam Latham. I'm here to comment on what I heard was
Address, sir.
1020 Lockview Drive, Bear, Delaware, 19701. To comment on some criticisms I heard as it relates to Croda. I'm a commissioner for the DRBA, but I'm not here representing the DRBA. I'm here as a past president of Delaware State AFL-CIO. I'm assuming all you know what the AFL-CIO is.
Yes.
I represented all the labor in the state of Delaware. As part of my job was that over at Croda, they have steel workers. And I represented those steel workers. I found Croda to be a great company in my relations with them, in my sit downs with them, in my talking with them. I don't know whoever made those comments, but I don't know whether they were sat down with Croda and the people at Croda. They have a great security system. They're great neighbors. They want to be good neighbors. They even want to be better neighbors. And I think that's what we all want. Whatever the business, we want good neighbors. And they are good neighbors. And anytime we've asked them as it relates to the workers or to the community, they've always been there. They've always answered the call. And so I just wanted to make sure, because I'm sure nobody from Croda probably even know the comments that were made, because whoever the coward was, probably they never even sat down at Croda or somebody from Croda. They can find out what they are like. I don't like people to antagonize and scare people. We're not children. And it just bothered me that I decided to come out tonight to speak on their behalf. Because I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure they're not aware. Don't be intimidated. Croda is a good, great neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, sir. Anyone else care to add to the public comment?
Before we go to written comments that have been submitted, I would like to ask the commission to consider that our policy is that comments should not name or attempt to intimidate individual commissioners. And I realize we don't have our legal counsel here, but I think that needs to extend to written comments. And it would be my preference that if we entertain written comments, which I think we're required to do, that if they name or attempt to intimidate commissioners, that they be sent back to the sender and that the sender be asked to rewrite the comment so that it doesn't do that, and that we'll read it next time.
Yeah, let's miss this. We always welcome comments, but yes, as is our policy in person as well, the attacks will not be accepted.
That wasn't posted prior
Sorry.
to that letter.
I was getting to that. Thank you. Thank you very much. But that's something that we will definitely, moving forward, we'll make sure that we will get some legal counsel on that. I handle that best. We'll be addressing that. Next item of business is the motion, discussion, and vote on the planning commission's recommendation on ordinance 537. So based on what we've heard, you need to have more discussion, Chris, or is there?
I would just like to address the gentleman's concern about having an existing business. So the property is proposed to be rezoned from retail commercial to residential. Any lawfully existing business can continue to operate as a non-conforming use under the zoning regulations. So if this rezoning is approved by city council, his business would become a legally existing non-conforming use. And per basic zoning regulations, and it's in the city's regulations, non-conforming uses can continue in perpetuity. There's, if they stop for some period of time, then they may lose their grandfather status. But essentially, an legally existing business is legally grandfathered and it becomes a non-conforming use.
Can I ask a question? If he sells the property, how does that impact it?
The non-conformity runs with the use, it runs with the land. It doesn't necessarily run with the property owner.
Okay, so if he could sell it and somebody else could continue to operate a business as long as there was not an interruption.
Yes.
Okay.
Good question.
Any other questions?
But your role is here to make a recommendation to the city council.
A motion to make the recommendation on the ordinance to move forward to city council. Great. Second? Tim, thank you. All those in favor? Thank you.
So it was a favorable recommendation.
Yes,
Not-
favorable.
Not necessarily to just move forward, but
To approve different.
To clarify, yes.
Yeah.
That's what
It's just fixing something that was wrong.
yes, I mean, the motion was.
I found. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Our next item is we are juggling the agenda, so the re-subdivision 37 West Third Street. 39 West Third Street. And Rogers, who just on this, the first one.
So Kathy, these were in their packets.
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
So there is a plan, a minor re-subdivision plan that's in your packets. And what is occurring is essentially an adjustment of lot lines. There's no new development potential being created as a result of this subdivision. About a year ago, I'll let you.
It's this one.
That's it.
7276.
Yeah, it's under the expansion.
Are we doing 702, 706? Not,
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, it's the Third Street.
where's the third?
The standard, application of handwritten.
Oh, the handwritten one.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Oh, I'm just getting up to speed.
It's just more than we've ever
I'm
done.
sorry.
Oh,
The big issue, I'm holding the issue that you
Yeah.
have. Sorry.
It's flat.
okay.
It's this one. It's pretty straightforward.
So we revised, the city council revised the subdivision regulations about a year ago to create what's called a re-subdivision. And a re-subdivision is a subdivision where there's just an adjustment of a lot line. There's no new lots being created as a result of this subdivision. Previously, these types of subdivisions used to go to the planning commission for review and approval. And when we amended the subdivision regulations, we created what's called a re-subdivision and created a process where these subdivisions, these types of subdivisions can be approved administratively by the building official. They have to go to city council for a perfunctory approval via resolution, but these in the future can be approved administratively by Mr. Bergstrom as the building official. Staff thought that since this was the first of its kind under the new regulations, we would just bring it to you and show you. No action is necessary on your part, but really all that's happening is there's an existing lot line on what is proposed to be lot B, and it's just shifting. So there's two lots existing now, and there's going to be two lots in the future. So this is what we would call, this is your classic re-subdivision where they're just shifting a lot line. These are typically reviewed only to make sure that that when you move the lot line, you're not creating a non-conforming situation, or you're not causing like violation of a setback by moving the lot line or something crazy like that. We need to make sure that the utilities are lined up with the lot lines if there's any utilities out there. But typically, that's why these are administratively, there's no administratively approved typically. that there's no new development. So we wanted to bring it to your attention just for informational purposes and knowing that these types of subdivisions in the future will be reviewed and approved as appropriate by the building official. So
The owner here, correct? Are there any questions?
I don't know if you guys are.
Heavily discussed in HAC,
Yes, it was.
which is unfortunate because I think there's a lot of confusion amongst all these committees and commissions about jurisdiction. And they had jurisdiction over design, but not around the rest of it. And apparently they spent a lot of time talking about this. Need to get that clarified, I think, for the whole city. It's who owns what here.
But
So do we need a motion?
there's
to-
no voting necessary.
No,
We don't need to
Just
do anything.
information.
Either.
The next item of business is the discussion of additional studies in regard to ordinance 536. As a courtesy, before we have discussion, additional information, I'm sorry, the additional reports that we're looking to consider. And again, I stress as a courtesy and not required to do this. But we want to make sure everyone's voice is heard, as long as it's heard without tax. So this is an email to the commission. The sender is Dorsey Fisk. The letter goes as follows. As former planning commissioner, I was shocked to hear that apparently many members of the planning commission largely dismissed the recommendation of city planner Chris Rogers of ACOM that the commission vote no on ordinance 536, though they will continue to study the issue. What reason is there to ignore professional opinion on the subject? This is to be the attitude of the commissioners. Why bother with professionals or even a planning commission? The developer gets zoning changed whenever he wants to build a project in town. Why bother with zoning? Let's just have anything goes, wide open town. I've witnessed Mr. Rogers' careful work with the city and been greatly impressed. I believe that the current commission, as I, were amateur volunteers who do not have the experience and background possessed by Mr. Rogers to set themselves up as having the ability to dismiss recommendations out of hand would be hubris of the worst kind and detrimental to our city. Moreover, the developer of Lucas Drive, Herrera, was involved with a disastrous project years ago south of town known as Riverbend, later turned over to Capano, which until recently has been more partly a recommendation to approve another proposal of this without deep investigation. We have too many multifamily building proposals approved for town without consideration of whether it would be good for the town and residents. I pointed out before that a developer is interested only in the money to be made. Once he has sold the units, he skips town. No more responsibility. Therefore, it's vital that the city government take care to ensure that development is needed, properly designed, and that necessary studies are made. I urge you to listen to Mr. Rogers and follow his informed and professional direction. That being said, we had the ACOM opinion presented at the last meeting. Since then, we've received suggestions as we had decided at that meeting to ask for additional suggestions for additional information, which Planner Rogers has provided. We've also received a letter of rebuttal from Mr. Tucker as well. So we've had the chance to review that. And I know that fortunately both Marco and Tim, who are new to the board, were both present at that meeting, even though they were not official commissioners at the time. And they've also been given the information to review as well. That being said, I hope we can have a thoughtful discussion, thorough discussion, and take it from there. Anyone like to get started? Would you like to, if we look at, we can either look at the reports suggested, or we can look at the points to be considered, whether we need additional information or not. So I'm open to suggestion on how you'd like to proceed. But I'd like to have a discussion so that we can get the additional reports needed tonight recommended to the applicant.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, can I just provide one point of clarification?
Yes.
For those members that weren't here for the workshop. Your role in this ordinance 537, again, just like the previous item, is to make a recommendation to the city council. And according to the zoning ordinance, when you are considering making your recommendation on amending the zoning map, which is what is being proposed here in ordinance 536, quoting from the ordinance, the planning commission is granted the authority to require and shall require prior to its public hearing, the condition to consideration of any proposal for amending, so on and so forth. That such petition, the rezoning petition that is, be accompanied by such maps, charts, sketches, rationale, and other information as the planning commission reasonably deems necessary for the proper and effective consideration of such proposal. So that's what this is, as we had discussed at the workshop, you are allowed to request additional information from those applicants requesting a rezoning. Typically, there is a time period within which you can consider such information, but the applicant in this case has waived any time limits on consideration of this additional information. So I wanted to just back up a little bit and put that in perspective. That's what you've asked. That's what this is in relation to your request from last month. Yes.
Thank you.
I have a quick, was any of this already shared with the applicant? For the type of report that we wanted to request, or do we have to make that decision today and then ask them for the petition?
They were CC'd on the letter to you, but you would want to affirm or not what you want from the applicant, so they have confidence moving forward and providing preparing the report.
Right. So we can suggest all or none over every side. So, Mr. Tucker, I see you at the dais.
Yes, Chairman, I don't normally get up until invited, but I did want to point out that we're prepared to offer some comments about the studies that were recommended and what we certainly committed to doing and what we would take some issue with, and would like to explain why the planning commission gives that opportunity. Doesn't have to be right at this moment, but I would ask for that opportunity to make a final decision if possible. Also, there's something that needs to be clarified for the record regarding what my client has waived and not waived. I've heard this a couple of times, and I want to address that tonight just briefly. We are committed to working with all of you and the town, the council, on this project, and if that includes some additional studies within reason, we're certainly willing to entertain those and work with you closely. However, I want to be clear what we waived and did not. We waived the 90-day rule that is contained in your code for you to report back to city council on the zoning request. We're now double that time. And in fact, we're almost triple that time. And I offer that only because I want to give perspective that we have been to almost, I think, now this is the 8th meeting about this project. And so when I hear folks speak and say, well, there's not been public input or there's not been enough, we've been monthly guests and we're happy to have been monthly guests. But this is one of the longest processes I've been involved with for rezoning. I've done this work for 20 years. I was a former general manager of Newcastle County's Land Use Department. I was a former county attorney. This is the longest in my 20-year history of appearing in front of planning and planning commission. And I'm happy to have been able to do that. I'm happy to continue doing that. But I think it'd be helpful for some of you to put that in perspective. How many meetings? We have, routinely rezoned properties of this size and scale with one meeting in front of a planning board and a planning commission. Again, I appreciate this town wants a little more input, a little bit more time, and we've been very respectful of that and agreed to that. But I want to be clear what we did agree to. We agreed to extend the 90-day rule. We did not agree to what Mr. Rogers indicated in the record, which was somehow the time to request studies was somehow waived. The code is very clear that to the extent the planning commission wants studies, they're supposed to be requested prior to the public hearing that we had last night. Again, we're going to work with you hand in hand to give you studies that we think are relevant and we'll offer valuable information. But just to clarify it, so there's no doubt as to this, if you read the May 19th letter from AECom written to Mr. Barthel and copied to all of you, at paragraph 7, and again, time has passed and memories fade, and that happens to all of us. But in number 7 to that report, AECom recognizes in recognition, and let me just read it all because I think it makes this very straightforward. The applicant has acknowledged the city's need to review the comprehensive plan for potential revisions to accommodate the proposed rezoning and ultimate development of subject properties. In recognition of this, the applicant has waived the time limitations within which the planning commission must make a recommendation to city council on rezonings. That is what we waived. We did not waive the report requirement when that has to be presented. That should have been presented before the meeting we had last month legally. It should have been. We'd have been happy to do that. We're still happy to work with you and do that. We've been talking about doing a traffic study for 6 months. We've offered to do that for 6 months. We wanted to do that as part of our site plan. And we'd like to talk a little bit about that tonight if we have some time. But I just want to be clear, we're beyond the law on this. And that's not through any fault of our own. We've been very open. We've attended 8 meetings. We've asked for input and feedback. We've brought professionals. And we're going to continue down that path with all of you. But I just want it clear on the record. We had not waived the provision that says that studies that were supposed to be presented before last meeting could be asked for or requested any time. We didn't waive it, but we're happy to continue to work with all of you as I think we have so far in good faith. With that, if you'd like, I'm happy to talk about some of the recommended studies, why we think some of them are unnecessary and why at this stage, and others that we'd be certainly willing to pursue if you'd like. And with that, I'm happy to step away from the podium and wait my turn.
Yeah, let's just have our discussion. If we have any questions.
Okay, very good. Thank you all for giving me a chance to interview.
Yeah, I just don't think it's fair to go keep the back and forth why we should do it, why we should do it. So I think we should have our discussion. If there's any additional questions, we can reach out. So,
Thank you, Chairman.
yes, absolutely. Thank you. I will start. Of the recommended reports provided by Planet Rogers, at least the bullet points, I identified 3 that I would be interested in pursuing. And I'll just identify them myself as the fiscal impact analysis, the provision of emergency services, the traffic analysis has already been offered. And I'm also curious about the Lucas Drive. I just feel like we need a little clarity on that. But I will open that up for discussion for the rest of the commissioners. They have other thoughts on other suggested reports or any questions for either Planner Rogers or for Mr. Tucker.
I'll chime in and say that like the reports that I think I am most interested in are the fiscal analysis, also provision of emergency services and the traffic analysis. I think those are probably the ones that I think I need a little bit more information on personally.
Based on conversation at the last meeting, I think that some of the concerns that Mr. Rogers raised about, emergency services resonated with some of the folks who are here tonight, so I would agree with that. I would like to add something that I think the city should do, because we should get homework too. Which is to look at all the businesses in the industrial park today and what their nature is. There's a lot of businesses in there that are not light industrial. There's, I won't be able to remember the names of all. There's one that does blood work. LabCorp, I think, is down there, which is really an office building type. It's not an industrial style of business. There are a whole series of other businesses which are much more like you'd see in an office park than what you would see in an industrial park. And I think we should look at that, because in a quiet way, that space has been evolving into a different kind of space already, not to mention the school, which we're all very well aware of, with something like 700 students right next door. The other thing that I think the city should do, and I think we probably have the data to do these things all very quickly, but I think they're relevant for the conversation, is how many houses there are around there in Buttonwood and in the neighborhood next door, which I don't know the name of. Sorry, I don't know. Collins Park. Yeah, and just get a sense, because I think we think there's a whole lot more places to live there than there are. And I think we ought to look at that. So I would suggest that the city of Newcastle do a little bit of work here, because this is a database issue. We should just be able to dive into our database and get this information. But I think what we'll find is that the Lucas Park industrial park is already well trending towards a mixed use environment. And I think that's relevant to our recommendation.
I think the only thing is though, is that like Collins Park is not part of the city, and I think some of the business area that you're talking about is not part of the city, so I don't know that we necessarily receive information on those particular areas.
Is it in that industrial park?
I think there's some areas that are not considered part of the city,
Okay,
if I'm not mistaken, is that correct, Chris?
Yes, the portion, if you're just talking about Lucan's Drive, the portion from Cherry Lane to the railroad tracks, that's located outside of city limits. So those businesses along Lucan's Drive between Cherry Lane and the railroad tracks are in the county. I mean, it's easily accessible for the assessment information to see who the owner is. So it's not like it's a
Not possible to get, but
yeah.
it's something that the city itself on the track.
Yeah, they wouldn't have building permits or anything like that, but you can see who owns what and
But wouldn't you want to know more the occupants, the tenants, as opposed to just who
Yeah.
owns it?
yeah, I'm trying to think of.
Business
the
information.
nature of the business, so we get the
Yeah.
sense of the environment.
Can't we get a list of business licenses that are on that street or something, maybe?
Sure, I think for the, again, for those uses outside of the city would have to contact the county for that information.
Or
To the extent,
state. It'll probably be the state.
to the extent it's not readily available or known from the assessment information.
Humans with legs can walk around also, like I did in the proposed development we're going to talk about tonight. I went and looked at it and I photographed it, and we can all walk around and go see these things for ourselves if we want to. So I think we can do that, and I think it behooves us as stakeholders in Newcastle to understand what's happening in that space.
Okay, that's good feedback. We should just, let's just stay on point. Our conversation is for the applicant as well, to make sure we come to an idea of what additional reports that we need and
I think we have the meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, so much room.
yeah, I agree. I agree.
Those are the ones I would, I really want to see the financial impact. Who does the financial impact?
Good question.
Under this scenario, the applicant would hire a qualified financial expert to do it. As we stated in the letter, we would recommend some sort of scoping meeting, of the city administration, to make sure that we're all on the same page about how that expert would calculate taxes and how that financial expert would calculate the cost of the city services. So they would do it and the city would review it.
So is it possible to get that by our next meeting?
And it's up to the applicant and the city's ability to accommodate a scoping meeting and to review the information.
So, the traffic was brought up, Mr. Tucker. What would you think would be the turnaround time on the traffic report that you suggested?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, board members. Fortunately, our traffic engineer could not be here to apply, but you've heard from her. She's very thorough. She's very well respected. She does a lot of this work in Pennsylvania. I would estimate she's probably going to be 60 days at least, and that would be with a scoping. It could be a little longer. Happy to follow up via email tomorrow after I speak with her. She's going to be here tonight, unfortunately.
Could we get a halfway report in 30 days?
I think we could give you an update on findings, and we certainly would not just include the traffic counts, but we know that Mr. Rogers raised concerns about the commingling of traffic and the safety of the road. We would have that included in that traffic scope as well, so we can add that in as well as any traffic data which we immediately request from the DOT and include that. So we can give you a midway kind of update on what we've got once we authorize her to proceed, which we're ready to do. I would like to be clear that we have offered to follow DelDOT standards. Our DOT has been doing these since the 70s at least, and they're very good at it. Or DelDOT, and they have significant regs that articulate the breadth of those studies and how you do them. I will share that DelDOT will not review a study that they don't have jurisdiction over. And that was suggested. They won't do that. But there are outside firms that are approved by them to review traffic studies for them that we would certainly reach out to and ask them to review our study just like they would for DelDOT and scope it. So just to give you a little more context of how we propose doing this. So 60 days is a little aggressive, but I think it may be possible. I'll circle back with you to confirm that, and we certainly give you a midway update as that analysis is being done.
How about the financial analysis?
So we could certainly add that. We did, and you were not part of the commission obviously at the time.
Sorry.
But no, not your fault. We're welcome, by the way, to the commission. But we did offer at the working shop a breakout of the taxes and revenue that was anticipated. And what we did was we used comparables such as the apartments that are down at Route 9 that were built about 7 or 8 years ago, right where Route 9 connect. Well, just past William Famers in Garrison, excuse me, thank you. Garrison was looked at as a comparable for tax purposes, but we did estimate and we did double check these numbers by a former county employee that ran the assessment department, Jim Smith, who now works in our office, and we had double checked the numbers generated by our client. And just to give you some rough numbers, and we can drill down into these, but the taxes, and again, I mentioned this at the workshop, it's been some time, taxes to the city of Newcastle on an annual basis, assuming 451 units, would be approximately 270,000. Newcastle County would be about 67,000. NCC vocational is about 500,000. Colonial School at 893,000. Impact fees, assuming the $6,000 assessment that was recently required for a project in the same school district, was actually about 6,000 a unit. The Department of Education only provides that on a
rolling basis, so we would have to provide our site plan, which we would like to submit, by the way, sooner than later. And they would look at that and they would tell us, but about $6,000 a unit is about $2.7 million. That's the same impact fee. It varies per project because as schools get built, they need money, and then they don't need money, and then they need money. And so depending on where you just happen to fall in the construction cycle, you may have a large impact fee, you may have a small impact fee. But the last one from the school district was around 6,000 units. So there's a total, we're estimating a total revenue in terms of impact fees that are a one-time assessment, and then the annual fees, but a grand total for the first year of about $4 million plus for all those different boxes that we checked. We also put on the record certainly that we would do private garbage pickups, so that burden would not fall on the city. That's something we offered as a condition of any approval that might be granted. And certainly there would be some burden on our police department. We're certainly prepared to talk to the chief about that and see if you might be able to provide us some data. But I just wanted you to be all aware that we have given a breakdown. We're happy to share that analysis in a spreadsheet with the town, so you can see how we did it and what we based it on. Does that mean we couldn't do a formal third-party outside analysis now? We could if that was something you really felt strongly about. We don't know how long that would take, but we can find out and report back via email tomorrow.
Can I ask a question about the trash services?
Certainly.
I know you haven't said this before. Was there like a limit on time for that? Is it just in perpetuity? Is it like a
In
10-year? Is it, you know?
In perpetuity, Commissioner, we would agree to that. As a part of a development agreement or a condition on the rezoning, we would handle that in perpetuity. My client does intend right now to probably rent the majority of this property, these units. So this is not something my client intends to walk away from anytime soon. I mean, certainly the whole property could be sold hypothetically in the future, but he sees the majority of this being rental right now. The market can change, but right now the plan is that the vast majority of this would be rental. And so they would naturally do the pickup for the rental anyway.
So, just to clarify, if the building itself was ever sold by your client to another person, they could say that they're not going to do the trash pickup?
No, we would agree to restrict it in perpetuity.
Okay.
So that would run with the land, and that would, we'd expect that council would probably make that as a condition of a rezoning, but we could also record a covenant for that. And would.
So I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. All questions are all fair game.
So what exactly, I mean, how many apartments, so it's apartments, townhouses, single family?
Sure, let me,
And I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. Obviously new to the board, let me just grab our PowerPoint, and if I may, I'll have Tiffany just hand them out.
Yes,
Just one, just answer my question. That's
Yeah.
all you need to do.
Yeah.
I don't want to look at it. I just answer my question.
All right,
That's
so
all I need. Just
Sure.
answer my question.
Let me give you the breakout here. I just want to fudge any of the numbers.
But the bulk of this, you think is going to be rental?
Yes, and I'll give you that.
And I'm guessing this is going to be affordable rental house?
Well, there would be a range because of the housing types, and this is one of the methods that planners often use to make sure there's a range. So the apartments would likely rent for less than twins. Twins would likely cost more to rent than towns. And so, and single family, if they were to rent the single family. So by offering a range of housing types, you appeal to a different market and
Right.
different income levels.
So which ones would be sold? Just
So
the
the singles might be sold. That's something our client's considering right now, but the towns and twins, there's beach and apartments, there's 272 apartments, 133 duplex units, 46 single family detached, and then there's the 12,000 square foot of commercial, and then there is, I don't know if that includes the clubhouse. That may not be. Yeah, commercial. Yeah. So the singles would likely be sold, but they may be retained as rentals. And I'm looking at our client's representative, who's a civil engineer and works for the company. But the towns and the twins and the apartments would likely be rentals right now, based on the current market conditions and what they're seeing. But whether they remain rentals or they're sold fee simple, the condition that the city would not have to pay for the trash pickup would be embedded in title.
And you'd pick up the single family houses as well.
That is correct. That's a good question.
Mr. Becker?
Yes, sir.
One of the things that perhaps you mentioned it, but I didn't catch it. The provision of utilities and the income from utilities, the municipal services corporation. Have you thought at all about, I mean, your client owns the property. They will develop it one way or another.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Have you dived into what the revenue might look like for the municipal services corporation?
We did not do the MSC analysis. That certainly you would expect to be a positive, and often that's a significant positive, but we did not include that in the numbers.
Tim, are you asking for maybe a comparison of what the proposed project is versus the warehouse?
I'm merely, okay, so Commissioner Gibbs. I am concerned about due process and about moving forward expeditiously. I think there's a lot of interest, certainly on my part, about the financial impact analysis. However, I don't know that it would materially impact my feelings about the project. It is a matter of curiosity. For me, the provision of emergency services and the traffic analysis are the things that are of much greater interest. I believe that, and I say this as a public health practitioner, where we think a lot about prevention and protection. I think that a lot of the other recommended studies here could be argued either way, and the data could be spun to go either way. However, provision of emergency services is an exterior opinion by the people who provide it, and the traffic analysis can be as well. So I certainly would be in favor of those two, especially in respect to your graciousness and the client for extending this out for a rather extraordinary period of time. I think there needs to be a balance there.
Thank you. And I noticed we do have Mr. Bergstrom in the house tonight. He is the fire marshal for the town, as we all know. And yes, I understand you also, unless you're resigning tonight. We would certainly meet with Mr. Bergstrom as part of the safety issue and concern. Certainly the state fire marshal, though we would normally only do that if he asked us to, but we're happy to do that proactively, as well as the local fire company. One question, certainly.
The thing we did at Riverbend, flat out, whoever's the fire marshal in Newcastle City is the state fire marshal. And Grover, the other state fire, state fire marshal, and most of the rest of the state who lives in town. But we demanded sprinklers in Riverbend, and that just cuts the angst of volunteer fire departments fighting fires in the building. For every building in that subdivision with sprinkler, you don't have to worry about racing across the city to get there. You buy time. And that's, I'm sure that after a bunch of cajoling, we're going to try and convince the developer to do that, the same as we did in Riverbend. And then our emergency services is, what you did in residential, which is just part of the course of business.
Yeah, I think our other concern was like safety, and I don't know if we could speak to this or, it's just something that will come up in a report possibly, is not just the response time for the fire, it's also for people being able to exit in case of emergencies or something like that, because there is only one exit. So I think that was of a concern. And then they were talking about the one exit that's blocked on Buttonwood, maybe having emergency services have access to move that or open that if needed. But I think the exiting also in case of emergencies is a concern.
Emergency services have access to exiting that Button Avenue to keep it closed, to keep the truck traffic off of to keep it out of the Wetwood neighborhood and to keep the trucks from getting stuck on the tracks. All of our fire equipment on those tracks, it's not, there's no reason we can't come in. This area is served by, I think, all hauling. I don't think that Goodwill comes right up to the edge of it, not quite into this jurisdiction, but certainly responses are, it's, mutual aid is just what happens every day in this state. If everybody's coming, actually 2 year elections. That's not.
And we were also thinking like residents being able to exit in case of emergency.
And they can leave, they'll be able to leave. They'll leave. Sure.
Commissioner, if I may add, we have volunteered and will stand by our commitment to create an electronic system that would allow that gate to open up. Empower the city, turn that over to the city for maintenance, but that way they would be able to do it remotely and not necessarily have to come out and unlock a chain or some other mechanism. I understand it's manual today. So we are sensitive to that issue. We think there is a path forward. We will include that, by the way, also in our traffic analysis, the two-way versus one-way. I think our traffic engineer will probably tell us that the one-way would meet DLOT standards, I think, but I'm not a traffic engineer. But in any case, we've offered to automate that emergency access and we'll stand by that. Thank you.
Any further questions from the commissioners for either Glenn or others?
I have a question. We're gonna get all this stuff next month. Then what? What do we do with it?
Well, we are driving towards, the reports are a result of the concern over the recommendation at the public hearing. We decided at that point to withhold the additional. So we're doing that, with our due diligence. The goal is to forward to recommendation, vote on recommendation to say, you know, the recommendation, use the information. And that it's, I guess we owe it to the public to make sure that our due diligence supports our recommendation. Yay.
Well, I'm, as anybody who's listened to me knows, I'm very happy to say I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So let me just say that I get a fiscal impact analysis. How do I know what that means? How do you know what that means? Do we know what that means? We get a provision of emergency services and Holloway says, yeah, we got you covered. Are we happy? Do we want more? I'm asking you all and you. I mean, help me out here. We get a traffic analysis. I thought we already had most of this stuff. So I guess I'm feeling a little bit surprised because I remember looking at an awful lot of data. So you know, we're taking it upon ourselves to make some very serious decisions here. And I do know a few things, by the way, a few. But if you're asking me to make a financial impact analysis judgment on a 400 unit development on the city, I get some numbers. Now what? How do I know? How do we know? How do we make sure that next meeting is not another one like all the other meetings we've had this year on this project, which have been unfortunately unconclusive, even though we've been given a lot of data. So any thoughts?
Yeah, where would you like me to start?
Start with financial impact analysis.
Financial impact analysis is to ensure that the taxes generated from the project are sufficient to cover. And it's one of the many things that are considered in a rezoning and more specifically a comprehensive plan amendment. So
we get numbers on a page. How do we know?
You would have the city, those that are familiar with what they're looking at, provide input on it and tell you whether the numbers are good or not. Now, of all of the things on here, I would say that item is probably more appropriate for the city council. That they're the ones that are most responsible for making sure that this project is fiscally sound, that this land use decision is fiscally sound. So I could see that not being a planning commission item. I threw it out there because we had talked about it in the past. But when it, it would be good when it goes to the city council, that's already prepared and that's part of the package that gets to them because they're going to have those questions. So it's up to you whether you want to do that now or just defer to the city council on it. The traffic
Because let
impact.
me just stop for a second. So that means if we want to look at it, we need to tell the city, the city people who are responsible to show up at our next meeting and testify about it. Is that right?
No.
Okay, help me understand.
That the applicant would have we would decide whether or not, or I think the city administrator would decide whether the spreadsheet that Mr. Tucker was talking about and the analysis they've done to date with the comps of using the other project would be sufficient. But they would have a meeting with the city administrator to confirm what are the parameters of a fiscal impact analysis. The city administrator would decide whether the information they presumably have at the time would be sufficient, or you would ask for more expert opinion on providing taxable income that would be generated from the project. The most important thing out of that, I think, is talking to the police chief to see what the chief thinks would be the additional police need as a result of the project. And then that would be part of information given the city council for them to review as part of their decision-making process. So I don't think we would need anybody from the city to come and testify. It's that the applicant would ask the city what would be required. The applicant would provide it. We would determine with the city whether it was valid information and report back to you.
So in other words, it's not in our scope for the next meeting, right? We're just as provisional. If we recommend to go ahead, then this should be done to present to city council. I was trying to understand what we're doing in our next
No,
meeting.
I just think it's, I think it's fair to assume that with the financial report before, we may not know all the answers. We can probably look at it and get a sense of whether it makes sense or not. So I think we could make that.
Yeah, even if we don't drill down to the level that the city council normally would, I think we need to have a better idea of what kind of stress it's going to put on the city resources financially and whether or not their proposed numbers are what the city is also expecting. Because I'm sure the city's doing its own sort of numbers on some of this as well. And, I would assume to see like if they're comparing. But I think as long as we have some type of something showing financial, what the tax income is and what the burden is to the city, and how it's offset by the taxes, then, I think we could make a recommendation based on that, along with these other reports and based on the information we've already received.
Okay.
Whether or not that's going to be the defining factor for our vote, I don't know, but I think it's just something we consider along with the others and just take what information we can get maybe by the next meeting. And if we think we have enough information at that point, we can go ahead and make a recommendation. And if not, then
I like that, Bree. So that sets parameters because you could do a financial analysis that takes 6 months, right? I've done it. So I'm just trying to understand what is our expectation for the next meeting and how are we going to make a
because as Mr.
decision?
Rogers said, they can look at what numbers they've already put together and say, is this enough? And if it meets the minimum criteria for the city, we can move forward with the numbers they already have and they don't have to invest anymore in getting that to us. So it could potentially be a quick turnaround. If it takes longer than, until the next meeting, then, we can still move forward with the other information we have, or we can feel like we need the numbers to make a decision, then we wait. I'd rather not push this out too much longer myself, but
So I'm hearing that we have identified 3 reports that we would like to ask the applicant to consider. And what we ask is perhaps if we would know as soon as possible that the expected turnaround time on the reports, we'd like to include them next. We'd like to have them obviously prior to the next meeting. That's if 60 days is more realistic, we may.
Yeah, I think for the
everything.
Yes, Chairman, I think for the traffic, just to be realistic and manage expectations, we're probably 60 days out. And we expected that, by the way. I mean, we kind of built that in. We would have started earlier if we were at a site plan level. But we would like to get our site plan submitted sooner than later. So we're prepared to begin the traffic study immediately.
Yeah,
Um,
and you had said you could do some type of update possibly by our next meeting. So
Yes.
We can take a look at potentially a short range and see if that can help us determine our response. And then, you know, if we really need to wait for the full 60, then we would.
And if I could just add this additional thing to Commissioner Patty's comments, she has, and you all have seen data from our traffic engineer. What our traffic engineers is done as an initial step that didn't require current traffic counts is she took DelDOT's trip generation manual, which is used for all traffic studies in Delaware. And she looked at what the traffic generation would be in that manual for our proposed mixed use that's in front of you right now. Then with the help of our civil engineer, she looked at how big of a logistics center could be built, how many buildings could be built. And she looked at that same traffic generation manual to see what it projected the trips would be. And then she compared the two to demonstrate that actually during the peak hours, the AM and PM peak, the mixed use would actually be a lower generator. So that was the data that you did see that showed those basic numbers based on standard trip generation manuals that are used across the country. There are different editions that get updated every so often, but we use DelDOT's, whatever their current edition is. This traffic study, formal traffic study, would now dig into the actual trips. They would actually count literally with a clicker how many trips are coming out, what type of vehicles are coming in and out, and they would see how that falls on a scale that's called level of service in Delaware. It's used by our DOT and tells you whether it's what's called a passing level of service or a failing level of service and what improvements, road improvements may actually be needed. And so her full analysis goes into that next step, which again, we've offered to do from day one. I think the sooner we certainly get started with any additional analysis, the better, obviously from our perspective. We are obviously missing a market to some extent. Over the past 6-7 months, the market has changed dramatically, but it happens. But we are happy to move forward and do any studies that the commission thinks are necessary. And as long as they're reasonable. I haven't heard anything tonight from all of you that sounds unreasonable. So thank you.
So you just moving into the motion to request from the applicants a fiscal impact analysis reports, provision of emergency services reports, and the traffic analysis out of the 30-day or if we need to push out 60-day report.
So wait. And also that the city of Newcastle put together a report on all the businesses in the industrial areas, so that we have some context. Number of houses in Buttonwood and rentals, if we can get it. It's not hard, we should be able to get it easily. And in whatever other closest developments there are that may be impacted by this. I mean, we could say we don't care about our city, but maybe we do, I don't know. Prepared to discuss that a little bit further, but I think that context in this case makes a difference in terms of the decision-making process. So I think we should add that to this motion. And I'm prepared to help with that if that's necessary.
Yeah, I'm smart. That should be a separate motion. So let's get back to. So I just want to keep things moving for the participants as well. But again, we need to be as thorough as we can. So thank you all for your patience. So again, let's have a motion to request of the applicant, the 3 reports that seem to be a consensus amongst the commissioners at this time, which is the fiscal impact analysis, the provision of emergency services, and the traffic analysis. Something that Commissioner Gibbs, thank you. Seconded. Commissioner Rivera, thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No, you need a second motion from the
Just,
city or not?
This is a point of order, Mr. Chairman. Typically, after a second, that's when you would ask for discussion, just as that's how
No,
typically.
that's fair.
And then if there's no discussion, that's fine. Then you can move the.
Oh, we
then you can
discussed
vote.
it.
No, but that's, you're not discussing this specific motion that's on the table.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Um, Let's go back
Discussion on the motion?
and discussion on the motion. Other than we will add an additional motion to Cynthia Brickman as well, Commissioner. Right. So we'll vote again. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Motion passes.
No, does Cynthia need to make her motion?
That'd be great.
Probably.
Sure.
So I make a motion that the city of Newcastle put together a report that identifies all the businesses in the industrial park, and that includes in the lead-in as well. So not necessarily just that street, but that area, so we have a sense of what's happening there, the nature of the business, name of the business, that sort of thing. And that we then also get a report on the number of houses around it in Buttonwood, if it's at all possible, the ratio of rentals versus ownership. In those, we should have easy access to that. That's not hard. So, and then in the closest developments, which I don't know what they're, I think we would determine that with whoever's going to do the work in the city. Maybe it's that guy over there who's looking frowning. So,
It'd be tougher to get rental units because maybe that's.
well,
I can certainly get the number of dwelling units.
okay. No, we can.
The county requires you to have a license to rent, so you might be able to get it from. Well, that's true. I would agree with you on that.
Even a field is helpful.
We really need.
You're better
I
at,
think the one point I wanted to make with the request is that, you know, we can request it of the cities, but if we don't get it, you know, in time, that I think we.
Oh, we can
with
still
what
make a
information
decision.
we do.
Yeah, we can still make a decision, but I think that the argument that the petitioners are making is that it's context. And I think if we see a broader context, that will be helpful to us. And I don't see any reason why this can't be done in the time available, regardless that it is Christmas. Maybe we move our meeting out a week, in January to allow for that. Because it is Christmas, although we are.
but then we're gonna
yeah.
conflict with the city council meeting,
Right.
won't we?
Yeah. So
Actually, and I might have some access to some of those reports, so send me the list and let me see if I can get some of it on.
Okay. Anybody want to second my
I'll
really
second
diverse
it.
motion?
I was going to mention also that we talked about the business licenses as well. Didn't want to add that.
Yeah, add business licenses. Who writes these? Does she write them all the time? How do these get written up as, Kathy,
Yeah, they're-
Kathy, did you write this all down? Have it help you, thank you.
So, so moved.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your thoughtful discussion. Thank you all for your patience.
Thank you
for
all.
your feedback. Thank you, Planet Riders, as well for your feedback. We are continuing to move with this project. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda, again, is the review of concept plan for recommendation to Board of Adjustment for section for 702 and 706 Delaware Street. And again, I'll turn it over to Planet Rogers to.
Thank you. Chairman, while the applicant's getting set up, I'll just provide the background. What you have in front of you is a concept plan for proposed multifamily development in the downtown Gateway zoning district, the PG zone. Your role this evening, and yet another role of the planning commission, multifamily developments are permitted as special exceptions in the DD zone. Special exceptions are reviewed and approved by the Board of Adjustment. Your role here tonight is to hear the applicant and, based on the information provided to you, make a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment on the merits of the special exception. Special exceptions have their unique, maybe not unique. Some uses are permitted uses. Some uses are permitted by site plan, and some uses are permitted by special exception by the Board of Adjustment. It would be whatever, your recommendation is. If the special exception gets approved by the Board of Adjustment, our recommendation would be that they would return to you a full-blown site plan. So this is not meant to be the ultimate site plan, but the Board of Adjustment does need some sort of plan on which to base its decision. So your role tonight is to take a look at the concept plan as the planning commission would when reviewing a site plan and make general comments, but also to make your motion tonight should be relative to a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment on the special exception. One other item, no, I'll go over it when we go over my letters.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers, and thank you, Commissioners, again. Happen to have a second matter on, as you just figured out again. It wasn't that I didn't want to leave. You'll get something to eat, but thank you for bearing with me. So as Mr. Rogers correctly indicated, we're here tonight about 702 and 703 Delaware Avenue Street, 706.
Yeah, it's wrong in that. letter.
The letter is
So-
702 and 703 is what the letter
Yeah.
from
Sorry about that.
So it's 706, thank you.
702 and 706.
And as Mr. Rogers correctly indicated, this is a concept plan only. It is required under your new recently amended ordinance for the gateway to do concept plans in this instance because this is subject to plus review. It will be going to plus, we believe, early Wednesday morning. So this will ultimately be followed up by a site plan. There is not a rezoning requirement here. The property is done correctly, but the recent amendment to your ordinance does require the Board of Adjustment now to approve this type of project. I believe the original version permitted it, but certainly the current version does require Board of Adjustment approval. We did review Mr. Rogers' analysis that is dated December 16th. Here with me, of course, is Mr. Ziegler, who's with McBride Ziegler, who's our civil engineer, and Mr. Valaskasas, George Valaskasas, who some of you may recognize.
We know that guy.
Who's a former commissioner. And this is his application, his entity. This evening, but he's for that entity. With that, I thought I'd let Mr. Ziegler walk you through the site plan, the concept plan that we have tonight, and then we have some architectural renderings we'd like to share with you. They are preliminary. They're going to be a bit more detail when we get to site plan, but we wanted to give you a flavor for the project and the architecture and the materials. Hopefully you'll find handsome. And with that, Mr. Ziegler, would you walk us through the plan?
Absolutely. All right, if I do it from here? The property is roughly 1 acre, it's a little over an acre, and it is in DG. It is on the south side of Delaware Street, just to keep everybody oriented. I'm pulling north, straight up facing Delaware Street. Bounded by the Norfolk Southern Railroad to the west, West 7th Street to the east, the residential properties to the south. There are currently 2 existing residential dwellings on that property. I should have already said one's right here, one's right there. And there's a couple curb cuts located off of Delaware Street. And also just to get everyone oriented, this is across the street from the shopping center where Porta Fino is. Anyway, we're proposing a 3-story apartment building with 32 apartments. And it'll be comprised of 2-story and 1-story residential dwellings. 2 bedroom. Will be 40. That behind the building is 48 apartments old. We already have been in contact with Bellot, and we are showing a taking right here. Bellot is signed.
Showing a what?
A right away.
Okay, because you got to translate for us.
That's right. No
Regular
problem.
people.
I apologize. A right away.
What is the right of way take?
There's a couple ways of explaining that. It's a taking that Bellot requires in the
let's say in the future, they want to make a improvement to Delaware Avenue or 273. As part of the review process, sometimes they ask for property. So it's property that's actually owned by George, but it's being conveyed to Delaware. And that's required to get their approval. So they have.
If they ever want to widen the road.
That's right. If they want to widen it or they want to make these move work. One of the things about this project, which I think Delaware is going to be very favorably, that we're eliminating the curb cuts off of Delaware Avenue, Delaware Street, and that's a real busy area right there. So we're going to be coming off of West 7th Street. And we will have an underground stormwater management system. The plan, currently the open space allowed and the impervious coverage allowed is 80%. We will have substantially less of that. It'll be 73%. We've allowed for adequate touring movement for trucks, for trash trucks, for loading, etc.
Where would they be coming in and out? Off of 7th Street?
Have all the 7th
Okay,
Street,
yeah.
right, and then out onto Delaware Street. And that's kind of the plan in a nutshell. It's going to be a 3-story building with 32 residential apartment blocks.
So you have more than one parking space per unit.
1.5,
1.5.
right, and there's going to be some one federal apartments, so we think it's going to work. Plus the fact across the street, where is it? There's a couple bus stops, so this has good proximity to also.
There's one off of 6th Street and then one of the further
Right.
down across from the shop.
Right.
So they're both walkable.
Mr. Ziegler, just so we cover the comments from AECom fully, there was a concern about the primary access door, where that's going to be located. And also, a clarification regarding that 4-year-old landscaping plan. Can you clarify that for the record? I think it was an old note.
I apologize. So we are in receipt of a letter, with a thorough letter, and we have no issues with the file. We did have a note that we cut and paste from another plan, we referenced, I think, 2018 landscape plan. So this plan will be a landscape plan by Gary Burson, who's a registered landscape architect. As far as the primary entrance, I talked to Kevin Wilson, this will be the primary entrance right here. And I think the rendering that George has, the front facade of the building will depict that here.
Oh,
This is the primary entrance in the center.
but you can't get your car there. It's just a
Correct.
walk-in.
Yeah.
Well-
And Commissioner, it's a great point. The way the code is written though, you have to front the road and your setback is such you can't put parking in the front. So you have to put it in the rear. It's just.
But you have to have the front door on the road.
I know, that's what the code says.
And
You're absolutely right. You're spot on.
It's not even a setback, it's actually a build-to line. It's different than a setback, and it's an important point that you raised. They don't want you to be any further back than 15 feet. In fact, you can put the building closer, but there's a practical consideration. So this door, the rear entry here is a little wider because from a practical standpoint, when people move furniture in, this is where moving trucks will be located. So that's why it's behind the building.
So is there going to be sidewalk in front of the building?
Yes.
Okay.
There's gonna be a 10-foot wide shared use path along Delaware Street, and there'll also be a sidewalk behind the building.
It'll be a much larger sidewalk in the front now.
So shared use, right now, I went and walked it today at 31 degrees. And I photographed the whole thing in case anybody hasn't had a chance to do that. It is hideous, that space. The whole thing is hideous. And anything would be better than what's there. But what struck me was the very weird space on the street, which is, you used the phrase multi-use or something like that, walkway or something, but it's not clearly defined. There's no sidewalk there. So, for me, this is an opportunity for the whole city to fix that whole space.
Mhm.
The gateway is an atrocity right now. And so this is a way that there could be some motivation to make it look nicer than it does. But I can't, from what you're saying, and I realize it's maybe too early to ask this question, but how would that all resolve? Because some of that looked like part of the road, which you couldn't actually do anything with. And then I have trouble visualizing the rest of it.
Well, right,
Just point to the multi-use path.
well, the multi-use path is actually right here. That's right up front, off of Delaware Street.
Off of Delaware Street,
So
yeah.
it's gonna be in Dot's right away. Dot has already looked at this briefly, and this is what they want. So ideally, Dot at some point in time in the future, they're gonna wanna see multi-purpose paths everywhere, particularly in cities and municipalities.
Well, we want that too. The whole,
Right.
I mean, the city council's been very focused on bike rideability and stuff like that.
Right,
Yeah.
so George is gonna be doing his part, he's gonna make sure that this is a much wider sidewalk than it's out there today. And there will also be a sidewalk in the rear that extends out to West Seventh Street.
So Mark, just so we're clear, there is enough space to put in the sidewalk from the surveying and right away, that you're comfortable with that design.
And I can also tell you that we won't get this approved by Delta if we didn't have that route.
No,
So,
no, I
yeah,
get that.
Yeah,
No, you gotta follow the rules. I get that.
I was just gonna make a comment, because I know that, part of the work that WMAPCO had done was about improving the gateway area and improving the walking paths and biking paths and things like that. So it sounds like what you're implying is that this will be in line with what WMAPCO was already planning sort of for that area. And are they gonna be involved with like assisting you guys with that? Because I thought there were some plans that they would help with. They were gonna be working with the downtown gateway on improving those areas.
well, the only thing I would say to that is I haven't reached out to Will Mapfield yet, it's early in the process. However, we're going with Sean reference, we're going with Plus, I know that Delta, I think,
Okay.
coordination, everything with them. So I think that we're gonna get a lot of that back between now and then on.
Okay, because it sounds like what you're planning is already kind of in line with what WMAPCO had already sort of
Yeah, I think
planned
Will
for that
Mapfield was
specific like area with, you
Right.
know, improving bus stops, bike pathways, walking
No,
pathways.
Will Mapfield would be happy with this one.
Unless that's funding it, though, our client will have to pay for it. They're fund, if they have some money set aside, we might get lucky, but I doubt it.
So that's not good for you.
So, I mean, just to be clear, Will Mapco is just the, a planning agency that
Yeah, but I thought they were like helping them plan like how that is gonna be fixed or improved.
there is a, the city of Newcastle transportation plan, and this is one of the focal points for recommendations. And that is something to take a look at. There are different alternatives for improving or addressing this intersection.
Mhm.
So, that's one of the things that we need to be taking a look at moving forward to make sure that, to the extent, it's feasible and legal, that this is in line with that.
Yeah,
plan.
that's what I was,
plan, yeah.
wanting to make sure that, because we had already done all this work with WMAPCO, we already had sort of this transportation plan in place, and, it sounds like this is in line with that, but I just wanted to make sure.
So is this what's up against the railroad, and that's supposed to be where they're putting in that new thing that's supposed to close off 8th Street? Kind of, it's gonna be right near there.
It's gonna be with the grassy area you're talking about, as far as what's not 8th Street, or
Yeah,
because they're gonna redo the train tracks,
is that gonna impact this at all, or do you need to talk to the,
no,
okay,
this is on the other side of the track.
okay, just checking.
George, could you also show your other rendering that shows the rear? I think that would be helpful to see. George is providing a nice rear entrance as well up against the parking lot, so there will be the opportunity for folks to use that regularly as well. But we are required to show a primary in the front as well. So
Oh,
even
it
the
looks
rear
pretty.
has a very nice,
Oh, big door.
yes, because most people coming with their cars are going to want to enter from the rear. I mean, that's
Now, it's the one question I have, is the space behind the houses currently paved, or is it,
Yes.
Yes, it is.
it's all just a big paved
There's
area?
actually, that's a good question. There's actually the site, if you look at the impervious coverage right now,
Mhm.
it's not what your typical residential dwelling. There's actually a big parking lot right there. It's actually roughly half the site. Yeah, it's roughly 45% impervious coverage already.
You're not impacting, say, the environment as much because it's already got.
That's right. We're gonna get some
coverage
credit,
from-
we're gonna get some credit for that when we do our drainage. We submit to soil conservation.
How wedded are you to this design?
I went,
How
Attached.
much do you love this?
I mean, I feel like I really like it. I try to bring some of the characteristics of the downtown historic district out,
Mhm.
using the different materials, the brick and stuff, and doing some, cornices and tramway at the top. I hope that you guys would like it.
Let me tell you my concern with it. it's beyond the Historic Area Commission. You're outside the Historic Area Commission area, so I think Leila Ham saw that she'd have a heart attack. But I was hoping, and I realize that the materials are different and the world is different today, but this is on the gateway to the historic district. I would like to see it not be Disneyland fake, but do a little bit more homage to the historic area as it's on the gateway. I see where you put a cornice in the top. You know, I see the bricks are just on the
There's a
front.
real complicated on there.
Real brick. Oh, that's good. That's very good.
Not
I
the-
can't,
not
can
the
you bring it
wicked
closer?
section.
What kind of windows are they? I'm gonna do a Layla Hammerman on you.
Sure. Divided lights,
Okay. Okay.
real brick, colonial brick. And glass
Right.
railing.
Things to think about as because we're not gonna approve this tonight, but things for the commission to think about is that this is right on the front of coming into the historic area, and is this, I mean, we don't want Disneyland fake, but you know, is this enough? It is pretty, but should it be more? I don't know. No, just things to think about. Actually, I walked that property and it is an eyesore.
It is, I mean, it's
So,
it looks awful.
yeah, and the look back at the parking lot. The only thing that's gonna be bad about this is that the police use it to hide their cars when they're.
There was one there today.
There was one there today, yes,
Exactly right. That's meant to
I was
be.
there, I saw it.
Must have been there in the afternoon.
I was there in the afternoon, and I walked up about 3 and took pictures. If anybody wants pictures, who hasn't been able to see it, I'd be happy to email them to you. But that would be my only concern. I think anything there would be better than the 2 hideous buildings that are there now. And it's like a wasteland. So it's an admirable project.
One other point that I didn't hit on Chris's letter, this project will be also, we will make sure that the building have a floodplain. By the city in the floodplain. We will,
Would it be elevated?
yeah, it'll be so that there's no chance of this flooding.
Their elevation will be elevated per code.
There hasn't been any issues with flooding there currently. It's still elevated.
And it'll be 720? That'll be the address, or is that why 720 is on the building?
Probably, yeah. And once we re-subdivide it, it'll be 720.
So we would respectfully submit that the plan is consistent with the downtown gateway requirements. We agrees with that, and we certainly will be back after we're to the Board of Adjustment with a site plan and some final renderings for your consideration, taking into account certainly commission.
Now, what is it you're doing?
Thank you. I was about to ask that same question. I think we're saying send it to the Board of Adjustment.
Okay. So we're approving this preliminarily?
Right.
That-
But you'll
Yes.
notice on Chris's. Sorry, Planner Roger. You've got your letter.
I wanted to give you some background on the DG zone because Commissioner Batty's hitting on the exact issues that the DG zone is meant to address. The DG zone, the DG land use concept was created in the 2009 comprehensive plan, and it was codified in about 2014 in the zoning ordinance. So this zone is the most prescriptive zoning category, in the city when it comes to architectural requirements that are under the purview of the planning commission, forgetting the historic district and the architectural requirements they would apply. The zoning ordinance contains very prescriptive architectural requirements for developments in the GG zone, and the intent and the location of the DG zone was to repurpose those underutilized parcels at Ferry Cutoff and on South Street near where the battery is and the other existing apartment complex. So Garrison. For example, facades shall have horizontal articulation elements. This is right from the zoning ordinance. At a minimum, facade shall have the following horizontal elements: window sills, lintels, protruding horizontal courses, vertical articulation at a maximum every 30 feet. Facade shall have distinct base of at least 18 inches in height at the ground level using materials that are different. There are streetscape standards. Public sidewalk shall have a minimum obstructed width of 10 feet in commercial areas. The planning commission may alter this if it is demonstrated that topographic conditions make the standard not feasible. So my point is that there's a lot that goes into developments in the DG zone compared to the other zones. What we have before us is a concept plan and your role in making a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment, on the use at this location. I have a recommendation and a motion articulated for you if you don't have any questions about any of my specific comments.
Some of the words you use don't make any sense to me, but let me ask you, does this comply with those requirements?
It's the first time seeing this.
Okay.
And my recommendation will be something to the effect that there's, I never see a need for an applicant to go to full engineering for a special exception. Because it's a lot of money. But mostly the DG zone, deals with the design standards. There's more design standards architecturally and site-wise in the DG zone than any other zone in the city. And some of the design standards we can tell are met by this plan. Others, we don't have enough information. For example, landscaping, streetlights, architectural plans. So, I don't want to necessarily jump to the.
So essentially our role is to just take a look at what they're presenting and take it into consideration, as long as they meet the DG zone requirements, they meet DelDOT requirements. And we think it's an improvement on the existing area, that we make a recommendation, it goes to special,
Board of Adjustment.
the Board of Adjustment. And then it's still gonna come back to us anyway with a little bit more of a more detailed site plan that we can drill down on.
Yes. I
Okay,
mean, I don't know that it meets, I don't know if that plan meets the requirements of the DG zone, but
but that's where like the site plan will come into
Yeah.
play, like,
Yeah,
so,
we don't need to decide that tonight.
yeah.
well, my recommendation would be is that the applicant submit enough information so that the Board of Adjustment can determine that it's consistent with DG zone and/or that the applicant is committing to the requirements of the DG zone. And then you'll see that if it's approved by the Board of Adjustment, you'll see that more detailed in the site plan. But the Board of Adjustment's going to want enough information to be comfortable that they are meeting or committing to the requirements of the DG zone. At a plan level, at a plan view level, we can tell that dimensionally, parking spaces, lot coverage, impervious surface, density, all of that is consistent with the DG zone. But there's a lot more detail that goes into it that,
Yeah.
I don't think we need to see. And, the Board of Adjustment may say, send it all, we want it all. But I think they just need to submit enough information.
But they'll make the determination of what additional stuff they may need that we may not necessarily need to make for this decision today.
For example, I would recommend that you find that the plan is consistent with the comprehensive plan. I think that's one of your primary roles in making recommendations to the city council on rezoning and to the Board of Adjustment on special exception. Is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? Yes, this is a multifamily unit development, that the applicant is clearly aware of the responsibilities associated with DG zone. And then in addition, the Planning Commission recommends that the applicant submit preliminary architectural plans and preliminary site plans demonstrating compliance and commitment to the DG design standards contained in section 230-21.1G of the zoning ordinance. And that's where all of that detailed information is. So if the applicant can choose not to do that and see what the Board of Adjustment wants, or the Board of Adjustment can say, I don't know what the Planning Commission is thinking, we want the whole package. So, but I think that's an appropriate balancing act between,
Chris, I see in your letter too, on or did you recommend that it goes to plus before?
oh yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they already.
Should that also be part of
They're
the?
scheduled for Wednesday.
So that's- We need to make that part of the motion.
I mean, they're scheduled for Wednesday, it's
We
it's
already
on
know
our
what's happening.
calendar, yeah. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I do recommend that you state that they respond in writing to plus comments before they go to the Board of Adjustment. I'm sorry. That's the question. So they're scheduled for plus. We're gonna have 20 working days from Wednesday that they will receive written comments. And then typically the applicant responds to the comments, and that's what they will have that in hand when they go to the Board of Adjustment.
And we will get those comments also. We'll do that.
When it comes, you know, if it's approved by the board and it comes back to you as a site plan.
I would just say to the applicant, this is a critical part of the entry to historic Newcastle. It requires superlative cleverness in terms of solving your problems at a price you can afford that still connects to the historic center. And as I walked down there and walked back today on Delaware Street, parts of Delaware Street down there are not beautiful, right? I mean, I think it's all the revisions that were done in the big project over the last couple of years stopped at Fifth Street. So, you know, one of the things that I'd like to see is for the city to pick up and bring the brick sidewalks and the granite edging all the way up to this. You know, let's finally turn this into one place instead of multiple places. And that's something I'd be prepared to go to bat for with the city council. But somehow it's got to have a bit more visual integration in my mind than what I see here. I don't know what my colleagues here think, but that's my view. And I know it's a tightrope. There's a lot of stucco covered buildings in the historic area. I
There's
think
a
you're
lot of
headed-
vinyl at the Garrison too, and I think it looks hideous.
Yeah, well, don't get me started on Garrison. But fortunately,
Stucco is a lot better.
fortunately, the Garrison is where it is. You know, this is going to be right next to the bulk of the historic Newcastle sign. So so just think about it. I mean, it's so much better than what's there now. It's great, but I just give it a little more thought. Push your designer and say, what do you think you can?
Starting events.
Okay.
Any further comment before we make a motion? So Chris, I'm sorry, could you?
If you deem it appropriate, I would recommend that the planning commission find that the proposed development is consistent with the comprehensive plan. In addition, I would recommend that the planning commission recommend that the applicant submit preliminary architectural plans and preliminary site plans demonstrating compliance and commitment to the DG design standards contained in section 230-21.1G of the zoning ordinance. And second, and further, that the applicant respond in writing to plus comments prior to proceeding to the Board of Adjustment.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You know, you might look at buildings in Edinburgh for inspiration. Edinburgh is a Georgian city. Newcastle is a Georgian city. There's Edinburgh, Scotland.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm like, where?
you might find design ideas there that were a little more consistent with the rest of what's going on. I mean, it's okay to push the boat out, but just go look at them, because they have avenue after avenue of buildings like this. And they're beautiful. So
Thank you.
think about it.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Whatever.
Okay, item number 9, special project related to the 2020 comprehensive plan. That's not.
But I'm picking up stuff, guys. I'm just letting you know, I'm picking up ideas. I'd love to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other stuff. Yeah. So, for Commissioner Gibbs, Commissioner Margot would be able to have, there are special projects within the comprehensive plan that we have the ability to take and run with. So we have a list of ours to check it out. So put together. Show you that at a later meeting. Any other comments from the commission members?
So wait a minute, I'm confused. So there's some special projects that we're working on, but we're gonna just talk about them later.
We're not actually working on them. We're just looking into them for
Future.
Yeah, we don't have anything currently being worked on, but there are things within the comprehensive plan that we would like to work on, so we may, you know, like we did a lot with previously with the, electric car chargers and stuff like that, so
Okay.
things like, so certain things that comply with like the comprehensive plan, you know, that was in there, that we would like improve the number of like charging stations that we had, things like that, so in previous meetings, we had brought that up, but I think it's at a point where that's kind of a dead, project, so we've kind of done what we can at this
Sort of
point, so.
finished more than 10, but
Yeah, so there are other things within the comprehensive plan that may require some work by us to like maybe look up stuff or talk to someone or, you know, get involved with a specific project that we have an interest in. At this point, we don't have anything on the table.
Okay. Thank you.
any other further comments? I'd just like to welcome Commissioner Rainey, Commissioner Gibbs to the team and diving in the deep end. So, welcome.
this is the busiest meeting I've ever been on.
It is.
that I've been on for 9 months.
And thank you, Commissioner Rogers, for attending and for your
Thank you.
clarification on
Yeah.
several items. Appreciate that.
Yeah, that just was, everybody's kind of new on the planning.
We
Relative-
are.
well,
So it's okay to
I think
say you
the amount
don't
of
know.
illness that when we came on was like a month of each other.
Yeah.
Has anyone spoke to the new members about the training through this Office of State Planning Coordination or through the University of Delaware?
Yeah, it's pretty universal.
I just briefly mentioned that we'll probably get an email from the city about it. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I think, oh, please go ahead.
So there's some training for us somewhere?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I also think that the entire commission needs a primer on what we're allowed to say to each other and not allowed to say to each other.
That's in the works as well.
And we really, really need to do that soon. Because there are sunshine laws that pertain to how we communicate with each other and things we say. You may have just seen that the state attorney just decided, because there was a FOIA complaint against three council members, city council members. Here, yeah, and just today, the state's attorney said they did not commit a violation after investigating it. So even within commissions or councils, there can be disputes over what people do or what people say, and it's just a lot easier to know. And getting that primer early is very helpful.
I've actually spoken with Mr. Parthel about that. He's going to speak with either Mr. Lasso
Or his replacement, because we're gonna have a new lawyer too.
to
His
go over
life
that with
is
us.
fun.
So, yes. Okay, if there are any other further comments, we thank the public for their comments as well. Is there a motion for adjournment?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Thanks. Could anybody give me a ride home to historic Newcastle?